Welcome to the FangledCast, brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand. So everybody, welcome back to the FangledCast. Today is an interview that I've been anticipating and really looking forward to. As you know, I've worked in about 120 different countries over the years, and I'm a culture junkie. And I was sort of playing around on YouTube and came across a guy that just really intrigued me. His name is Palmer Gambler, and we're going to be introducing to you in a second. He is a member of the Navajo Nation, grew up on the reservation in Arizona. And for the purpose of this, because the Navajo prefer, it is the Dene, not Navajo from here forward. I think that out of the respect for Palmer and the people that are his community, we're going to go with that. Now, the reason I brought him on the show is we're always digging into where does entrepreneurship come from in the real sense of what entrepreneurship is, and how do people in environments get that spark, and what kind of support system they have. Palmer has a website called the Stoic Native, where he's designed an entire fashion design, clothing design, apparel design around his traditions and his background. And quite honestly, if you don't go there and find something that you like, there's something wrong with you, because his stuff is fantastic. So let me introduce you. You want to actually introduce yourself, Palmer, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Palmer Gambler, as you said, from the Dene Nation. I grew up for the first couple of years of my life as an Army brat. So my dad was in the military, and he had an interesting experience that he told me about later on. Is that one day we were sitting in the living room, and he loved Westerns. Mm-hmm. And so we were watching a Western, and of course you have the cowboys and the Indians. And as a child, I looked up and said, "Oh, look, Dad, look at all these Indians." And he kind of looked at me and said, "Indians, you are an Indian." And he told me that little experience or exchange with me as a child kind of said, I think it's time that I need to go home and introduce him to, not just me, but all of his children, mm-hmm. to what it's like to be a Native American, and also just to get to know family. Of course, being in the military, we moved from place to place. And so he decided to move back home and got stationed down in southern Arizona before he served 18 years and decided that was enough and moved back to the reservation. And that's where I grew up a majority of my life, for sure. That's
really interesting. So you went from being everywhere to then sort of being in sort of a closed, tight-knit community of I assume relatives and family, friends, people that your father knew and grew up with himself.
Yeah. I definitely, it's a funny thing as far as worlds that I lived in. I grew up, amongst other peoples and cultures. My dad had a lot of friends from different ethnicities, African Americans, Hispanics, just a regular Caucasian mix of different peoples. And I went from that to, where everybody's Navajo, mm-hmm. Everybody's Dene, everybody spoke the language. It was definitely a transition. And I do remember having a difficult time coming back into that, but I'm very thankful that my father, he loved the military and he loved serving, and he decided to put those aside, mm-hmm. because he felt it was important to him to ensure that his children know where they come from. And I really appreciate that, because it has made a big impact within my life and even how I treat my children and raise them as well.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, one of the things, all the cultures around the world that I've encountered, whether within the United States or in, points beyond, the one thing that always endears me to cultures are the ones where family's first. Family first, education, and making sure that the kids are doing better than we did is always sort of that common thread that brings great people together. So that's a great story you're telling of your past. On your about page on the stoicnative.com website, you talk about the moment that your dad encouraged you to become a business person. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
And it's funny when you dramatize things, you look at one particular moment and you say, that's the moment. And, mm-hmm. I think when I look back on it, it's not really a moment, and that's why I have a really close connection, or at least an insight into community and what that means. And more importantly, as you mentioned, family. A lot of times we talk about business and things like that, but a lot of the impacts and mentorship that I got was from my family, and my family's very hardworking. My father was very much the same. And he always taught us that, or at least told us, that he never really got the opportunity or the support to be able to do the things that he wanted to do. He would always talk about his ideas that he wanted to happen in our community on the reservation, and he just couldn't do it, either from lack of funding, lack of support, lack of knowledge. And he just always taught us, I never got to do these things, and I would like for all of you to be able to do these things, to not rely on other people to be able to make your income, and give yourself a little bit of freedom to do what you want to do. And so him just always talking to us and teaching us is mostly that. He's just, you need to go to school to learn about what it takes to run a business, and what it takes to do this, and what it takes to do that. And my dad was a very talented guy in art as well, and he just never had an opportunity to do some of the things that he wanted to do because he spent it trying to support us as a family.
That's interesting. It really gets to the core of the most interesting thing, the thing that I'm most interested in the conversation, is in that environment. Where did that spark come from that you decided, I can be a businessman, I can take my design work and turn it into a business?
It's weird. I don't really know. I don't know. The older I get, entrepreneurs, they're very different. They they want something better, and we kind of conversed not too long ago, just to kind of get to know each other just a bit.
Sure.
But one of the things that you said was that, and I've heard this term before, is that we work a lot to not work for somebody else for a little bit,
Yeah.
and I've always had that sense. Like, when I was growing up, I really enjoyed construction. My dad was a carpenter. My uncle was mechanic, and a lot of my other uncles were ranch hands and stuff like that. And I really looked to them. And on the reservation, it's a hard life. They're, as far as my grandparents, there's still no running water where they come from. Electricity, I remember when they ran electricity out to my grandparents' land, and that was in my teen years. And so these kind of things that we often take for granted weren't available to my family. And I remember those times. So it's not like it was that long ago.
Sure.
So we would go and haul wood for the winters, make sure we had enough wood to keep warm. I remember growing up in this environment a little bit and seeing how hard my family worked. And I do remember feeling a sense of like, I can do this and make money. And and I just always had that sense. And it's hard to explain to people, like, where did I get that from? I think it's a sense that I was just always like that. And then my dad kind of had this teaching to just say, hey, you don't have to work a 9-to-5 job. He really loved coaching and coaching kids, and he wanted to start a team and do this. And he just never could find the opportunity to use those talents, in that kind of way. And so that's just something I saw. It's really hard. I talked to my wife about this. It's hard to know you're poor if you don't know you're poor. And I think that's where I was always happy in my home. I mean, the older I get, the more I recognize that my parents, both my mom and my dad, it's a rarity to have such great parenting. And the love that they had within their home, and the love that they shared with us.
Sure.
I thought just people had that.
Yep.
And I never understood that they didn't have the basic necessities all the time. And so as I grew older and I understood that became something that I wanted to do, that my dad always taught us, was not just to have what we need, but a little bit extra. And then we can begin to help the community after we have the needs for ourselves.
So there was almost a spirit in your house of we're living in adversity, so let's deal with it and do better rather than let's cower in the corner and let this adversity take us down. That's an interesting piece of that typical entrepreneurs that we talk to. And I wanted to find something real quick because
Mm-hmm.
I personally, it's one of my personal pet peeves, this word entrepreneur. There's a
Mm-hmm.
difference between a guy who owns a business and an entrepreneur. Many business owners are entrepreneurial, but there's a lot of people who own businesses that aren't. To me, the entrepreneur is the guy who gets that spark. You know what? I've got something unique. I've got an idea that I can turn into a business and then take the risk to go out there and do it and grow that business rather than I bought myself a job. I
Yeah.
joke, if you buy yourself a little franchise shop and you have to follow their rules, I've always argued, that's not entrepreneurial. It's I bought a business.
Yeah.
And
It's very.
there's nothing negative about that. That's an honorable thing
Mhm.
to be a business owner. But there is a little step above. For example, imagine if you had this conversation with other people on the reservation. I've got an idea for a T-shirt design. I'm going to turn it into a business. How many of the other guys would go, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to do it too."
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know what the response would be with your peers in your community.
It's an interesting thing, kind of what you're talking about. I kind of feel the same way. Um, I I I consider myself self-employed because I do a lot of stuff on my own, but at the same time, I'm trying to put myself in a position where I can have different businesses and multiple streams of income.
Sure.
And I look at my family before me, and they never thought like that. And now I teach my kids, and I try to, like, if you want extra money, then figure out a way to make extra money. Like, if you want, because sometimes they come to me and they want certain things, whether it's toys or
Sure.
whatever, and I'm like, you can go make that much money. It's not hard to make $50.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I would sell my t-shirts, I would teach them how to invest in, like, candy.
Yep.
So we would go to Sam's Club and we'd buy, well, what kind of candy do you think kids like? Okay, let's pick this. Let's do this. You guys have to manage it and
Mm-hmm.
collect the money and sell the things to the kids. And they would do that. And then at the end, we would all sit down and say, okay, I helped you and gave you $20 to buy all this stuff. You need to pay me back.
Mm-hmm.
All these things, and then teaching them how to split the money between themselves.
Yep.
How to save a portion of the money that they make and then have some that they can spend and play with.
Yep.
And I think that parents I was never taught finance.
Yep.
And that's something that I had to start from ground zero and learn and make lots of mistakes.
That's kind of where I was leading in my question. You're now the role model of entrepreneurship to your children and maybe your community. Was there anyone in your life that was a role model to you as to how to get your business going, or did you just have to figure it out?
I just kind of had to figure it out. I have a lot of, like, my dad, of course, like I said, he taught me. Even my father-in-law, he was very entrepreneurial. He was a graphic designer, still does it, not as much as he used to. And I saw a couple of Native Americans within the metropolitan area here. I live in Salt Lake City area. And one of them was a mechanic and he had his own shop. One was a oil, like a mobile oil. He had a van where he would take a drum and go change oil for people at their house so they didn't have to go into a shop. And I remember just seeing these people and being like, I can do that, and when I was employed with other people, I just have a hard time under this rule of the way things need to be done and should be done. Mm-hmm. I had a real hard time adapting to that. I would see, I was very fortunate to be trained, especially in the construction industry, under really good people who knew what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And when I began to branch off of those people that I trusted and work for other people, I found that they knew either less or weren't as good as what I felt they should do. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I was punished for it, which was weird to me. I got into a manager's position and I was helping in a countertop company. And I just had a hard time taking blame for things that really necessarily had nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. And it was just because I was responsible for these people. And if these people made mistakes, it was incumbent on me to fix it or take the blame.
Yep.
Um,
Or both.
and I didn't like that. And eventually, things just kind of work out the way they do. I was just pushed up against the corner. I was let go of my job, and then I was laid off of a job. And I finally just talked to my wife, and we talked about it. And she said, you can do this on your own. And so I just started. My wife got me my first job doing drywall patching, and I did that for a little bit. And I just was like, I really need to push myself. And so that's when Stoic Native was really pushed a lot more than I had done.
Cool.
So really, it was just perseverance, just really, like, I lost a lot of money, and like, it's just hard work and recognizing that you're not going to be a success. And that's what I tell people. I encourage all people, like I have cousins and stuff who want to do what I do. And I say, do it, but just know it's not going to be successful right off. You have to grit and grind. You're going to spend money that doesn't make sense, and you're going to lose it. But you got to know what's healthy risk, what you have to manage, what you can live and what you can live without.
Yep.
And then just continue pushing forward and doing what you got to do. So the answer to your question is, I don't know where it came from. I just had this desire.
I think we just heard it, whether you recognized it or not. So that's great. Hey, let's shift the conversation a little bit. I haven't asked you this yet because I wanted to wait for the interview. Tell me where you came up with this name, the Stoic Native. What does it mean to you?
So most people, when they think of Native Americans, they think of this stoicism. When the U.S. military and the Europeans came through and started pushing out west, and even when the Pilgrim area came in and stuff, one of the things that was always described about Native Americans was how brave they are, how they lacked fear, how they showed little emotion. And there's a good movie, because I love movies and entertainment, but it's a good movie, Smoke Signals, and I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't.
Oh, okay. It's an independent film by Native American filmmakers and actors. Really good. I recommend your audience and you guys see it just to get a little bit.
I have seen it. I know what film you're talking about. It's several years ago.
Has Adam Beach. He's growing a little bit of his name. But back in this time, he wasn't known at all, really. But in there, they have a good little gig where they talk about being stoic, and not letting people know your fear. And it's a great little interplay between these two Native American guys. And so it's twofold that I think, and kind of in what I have here on my shirt, like, we are descended from warriors. I think as Native Americans, at least my message through my line is that we need to remember where we come from. We come from a people that although we were conquered as a people, we were really well respected as braves and warriors. And we talk now about resilience and the idea of persevering. And I think we need to remember that that's in our blood, that's in our DNA, to be persistent and to always rise above. And so Stoic is kind of a joke and a play that's the way people look at us, but also that we need to look at ourselves in a way that people respect. We need to remember that we are strong and we are fierce. We have traditions that we need to teach and pass on. And also we're in a new world now. We're in this world that does require us to be financially stable in order to provide a more comfortable life for the next generation that comes. And so, that's kind of when I talk to people about Stoic Native, it's both a joke as far as the way people look at us, but also we do need to recognize that we as people are strong people, and we need to remember that's where we come from. And so that's kind of the play as far as Stoic Native in my explanation of what it means.
When I was growing up, the story that I always heard about how courageous Native Americans were when they started building skyscrapers in the US, and they always had to hire Native Americans to walk the beams because folks that weren't Native Americans were terrified of the heights, and the Native Americans would walk the beam like they were on the ground with no fear.
Yeah.
So it's funny how that I mean, I think there's absolute truth behind that culturally, that truly most Native Americans come from cultures that really have I don't even know if it's a genetic thing, but a bravery that people should should hold to a high esteem. Let's talk a little bit about the actual designs, because when I first looked at your stuff, I love your aesthetic. I think all of the stuff that you make, but I recognize that there's things on your site that were designed for a guy like me that would wear. Then there's other things that really are for Dene people, for their own pride and Native American pride. How do you feel about that in terms of your inventory, when in terms of how you design? How often are you designing for your people, and how often are you designing for the general public to admire and want to own your items?
That's a very good question. It takes a lot of thought, I think that's something that, I guess, in the inside of artwork that I learned from going to school. There's a difference between the passion and artwork that you create, which is very, for yourself, right? And then there's commercial art that's for as much of a broad audience as you can. So when I design things, I try to meet in the middle, even though I'm Navajo and I'm Dene and I come from that area, not all natives believe the same or have the same even cultural things that we have. And so when I think about being a Native American, those are the things that I try to design too, where I'm not just designing for myself, or I'm not just designing for my people as the Dene Nation, but I'm designing for all Native Americans, and something that they can feel good about that's not specific to any one tribe.
Gotcha.
It is kind of hard to do, but also I try to come up with designs, and I get asked this quite a bit, is like, would you be uncomfortable if you saw a white guy wearing this stuff? And I usually tell people, well, it depends, what are you wearing and how are you wearing it? I think the idea of cultural appropriation is a big subject today. There's a difference between wearing a shirt that was made by a Native American person, designed by a Native person, and your funds are going to support that Native American person in his or her pursuits, right?
Yep.
Versus taking somebody's headdress that is very culturally significant to a particular tribe and people, and mocking it and wearing it in a way that's not significant to that person, or mass producing this product in an effort to make money off of that particular cultural significant item, right?
Yeah, we talk quite a bit about this, the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. Because I would wear, for example, you've got some great stuff, designs, for example, about protecting Native women. You've got designs about the just beautiful things that aren't specific. But for example, I wouldn't wear the shirt you're wearing, "We're descendant from warriors," because I feel like that would be appropriation of who you guys are. I love the shirt, but to me, I would feel awkward wearing, because I'm not a descendant of warriors from a Native American tribe. I even correlate it back to like a Black Lives Matter rally, where if you support Black Lives Matter and you're not a member of the African American community, you go and you say, I'm here, I support you. But the moment you grab that megaphone and start leading your own chants and rallies when it's not yours, that's where you're no longer an ally and supporting, you're actually an annoyance. So I feel like it's the way that you design to be able to fit both of those. It'd be interesting, it's just for my own curiosity, to see how many people who are not part of your community are wearing the items that really weren't designed for them, and otherwise.
I think it's a really good question to ask, though, and I get asked it quite often, especially as my brand grows, right? People ask me what's appropriate for me to wear, what's not, and the answer is I don't know. It varies from Native American, to Native American. I might be a little more lax than some people,
Mm-hmm.
and some people might not even care at all. It just really depends. But I feel like if you've got a good head on your shoulders, you got good common sense,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think you'll know your way around it. And I find that people who ask know, like, okay, this is too far. Just like you're saying, I would probably wear yours that you're wearing, but I did see some that I would wear, and that's why I try to do that, is
Mm-hmm.
to show that, okay, yeah, you can buy stuff from me. And I think the appropriation part is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you buying items from Native Americans who actually created and this craft or this thing, or are you buying it from a third party person, whether that's a trading
Tourist,
post
yeah,
or
tourist shop stuff that came from came from the
yeah,
Far East. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think there's an appropriate way to get things, and especially artisan ways. But are you taking traditional regalia and wearing it like it's a t-shirt?
Yeah.
Those are the things that begin to cross the line, and that goes for any culture. You can talk about Muslims and Sheiks and even the Jews, and
Mm-hmm.
the special garments that they wear. Not everybody wears them. Why don't they wear them? Because they're sacred in many
Mm-hmm.
ways. And so I think sometimes gets lost on Native American community and clothing and wear, that there is garments that are sacred to them, and
Mm-hmm.
certain rituals and regalias and feather. Even the idea of feathers, a lot of it's really sacred to a lot of Native Americans, and how they earn those things.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we just take it a little lightly, and think it's okay to do certain things. But
Yeah.
my general consensus that I tell people is, if somebody's selling it, most of the time use your judgment and decide, because buying something supports the entrepreneurship of that person as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so we I feel like we should be able to purchase, if you're not part of the tribe, something that an artisan has created
Mm-hmm.
with the inspiration of their background,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
and being able to appreciate that work instead of then taking that artwork and then selling it again.
yeah.
That becomes,
Yeah. So
I
there's
feel
really
like it
there's
begins
there's
to
really kind of three categories that we're talking about. There's stuff that's made for everyone who can contribute, enjoy the beauty of it, and support the artist who is Palmer. And then there are items that you make that are similar, but they're really for the support of your people and causes and things that are relevant to it. And then there's sacred items. I've had the conversation about the Indian headdress with people who think it's okay to wear it as a costume. And I always
Mhm.
say, well, if you were going to a party and you put on a nun's outfit and spoke in pig Latin, would that be appropriate to Catholics? And they go,
Yeah.
well, no. So, well, then why do you think it's okay to put something on that's truly part of the religion, the sacred? Because it's cool. Well, I think you're missing the point. I, I really get it. And we live in a society now where we let the one guy who's offended determine what's offensive. But in this case,
Yeah.
it's an entire people who
Hmm.
who are offended by something that's happening. So maybe people ought to show a little bit more respect. Not maybe, they should show a little bit more
Yeah.
respect.
And that is a
So,
hard part, especially as a Native American too. Like, I don't want to be the kind of Native American where I'm just like, no, everything's closed off and belongs to us, right?
yeah.
But I think along the lines, and that's where just use common sense and be respectful.
Hmm.
I would never go around and wear traditional Muslim garb as my everyday clothes, because I'm not Muslim, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't then take what they wear
Yeah.
and commercialize it in a way that wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way about Native American regalia and stuff like that. That's why with t-shirts and stuff like that, I it's really a sense of sharing. I go back to the name, sense of sharing your pride. Like, I am Native American, and I tried to design
Hmm.
clothing that reflects that
Yeah.
I'm Native American, and that it's fashionably sensible to wear, hopefully. And you can also make a statement with the clothing that you wear.
Yeah.
And then I just make clothes also that are just inspired by Native American design. And
Hmm.
if you like it and appreciate it, you can purchase it too. So
Yeah.
I try to find that balance between those things.
Yeah. I like I said at the outset, I really like the work that you do. It was what inspired me to reach out and try to get you on the show. I'm so glad I did. We're kind of running out of time, but I always ask my guests the same question at the end as the final sort of thing. Tell me, is there something I should have asked you about you, your business, or your society that I didn't ask that you'd like to share?
I guess I would like to share that, with the Stoic Native brand and the idea of looking at natives as a emotionless people, the word stoic, that's really what it means is you're emotionless. That's why I use that. We're really not, it gives me an opportunity to talk to people. You had mentioned that you saw me on a YouTube video, humor is a very big part of our culture. Laughing, teasing one another, so I think too, you would find that most Native Americans are open to a dialogue, to talk and just to mess around and joke with you. There's always a subtle hint of sarcasm underneath things that are done and said. And, if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask Native Americans in general. A lot of them are very open and willing to talk. And a lot of them are really good people, really fun. Like, I'm amazed when I go out and sell my shirts and I meet people of other tribes. One thing that always connects us is joking around. And I'll be talking to people at my vendor table, just laughing with them and joking with them and things like that. And so I love the community that I'm in. My purpose in doing this is to allow myself an avenue to create something, because I feel like I have that gene within me to want to create art, right?
Yep.
But also it's a way for me to try to be an example, not only just to the community, but to my own children and to my family. Like, hey, we can do this kind of stuff, and we can figure these things out, and we can learn to support ourselves, and then take that and pass that on to the next generation, so that they can then again, in turn, create and build a new foundation for our communities as a whole, because the reservations and the reserves, they need a lot of that, just ability to help themselves, and a lot of that's through business and entrepreneurship, in my belief.
Yeah, for over my career, I volunteered a great deal of my time in like incubators and different ability for folks to reach out that don't have that entrepreneurial role model in their community. And it's always come back tenfold for me in terms of just recognizing that sometimes it's just that one meeting, that one session to sort of get through ideas that can take someone from the idea of having a business to really being successful. And I'm sure that there's a lot of that happening in your community too. But so anyhow, we're running out of time, and I just want to thank you again. Anyone who's enjoying the conversation today, go to, and you'll see in the notes, the website stoicnative.com, and check out the great stuff that Palmer makes. I encourage everyone to watch the show, to buy 95 shirts for your family for Christmas this year. Well, 96 if you've got the cash. I think you'll really
for
like
yourself.
I think you really like what he does. And I'm so glad to have had you on the show. If you enjoyed the conversation today, of course, you can kind of reach down right there and click on that subscribe button. Tell a friend, fax an old person to let them know the FangledCast exists. And we will look forward to seeing everybody again on the next episode. Thanks again so much for coming on, Palmer.
No problem. And thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come and just converse and talk.
I loved it. Talk to you soon. Brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand.